It was just after sunrise when the first officer pushed open the cabin door and froze. The interior smelled like burnt coffee, pine wood, and blood. There, on the wooden kitchen floor of a honeymoon cabin tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, sat 42-year-old Derek Lawson, hands shaking, shirt soaked in red, and the lifeless body of his new bride cradled in his arms. They had been married for exactly 2 days. 6 bullet casings glimmered across the floor like broken pieces of a promise. The Glock 19 he'd used lay several feet away, still warm when police arrived. And when the officer asked the most basic question, "What happened here?" Derek didn't claim self-defense. He didn't blame an intruder. He didn't even try to run. He just stared into nothing and whispered for words that made absolutely no sense. "She used to be my best friend." In the hours that followed, the story snowballed into something far bigger than a domestic murder. News outlets pushed alerts before investigators even zipped the body bag. Honeymoon horror. Wife shot 6 times by groom. Hidden truth behind the wedding night. But the real shock came when detectives identified the victim, Eliza Hart, a soft-spoken skincare specialist from Atlanta who, according to her marriage license, had no family nearby, no past worth noting, and no reason for anyone to want her dead. Except Derek. And the reason he gave didn't fit any standard motive. Not jealousy, not rage, not money. Derek claimed the woman he married, the woman he said made him believe in second chances, wasn't who she said she was. He insisted she was once Jonah Hart, his closest friend in high school, the boy who vanished without a goodbye more than 20 years earlier. A revelation so bizarre that detectives initially wondered if Derek was hallucinating until they found a journal. The scars, and the notes still locked in Eliza's hand. By noon, America was already arguing. Was this murder fueled by betrayal, by identity, by prejudice, or by something darker, something buried so deep inside a man that the truth detonated it like a landmine? Whatever the answer, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a honeymoon gone wrong. This was the collision of love, identity, and a secret powerful enough to destroy them both. He met her on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day that never hints it's about to rewrite a man's life. Derek Lawson had stopped by a small cafe off Glenwood Avenue after another long shift at the auto shop. He looked tired, older than his 42 years, the kind of man who'd learned to live with silence because it hurt less than disappointment. His marriage had ended 2 years earlier. His circle of friends had shrunk to one. And somewhere along the line, he convinced himself that whatever chapter of life held love had already closed for him. Then Eliza Hart walked in. She wasn't flashy or loud. She didn't command attention the way some people do. Instead, attention seemed to quietly drift toward her, like she pulled the air in the room a little differently. Her curls were pinned loosely above her neck, her posture gentle but steady, and when she smiled at the barista, it was soft, intentional, almost soothing. Derek noticed her before he realized he'd noticed her. She sat 2 tables over with a cup of chamomile tea and a worn paperback. Every so often, she lifted her eyes from the pages, observing the world with this calm, thoughtful look that felt strangely familiar, like she understood things she never said out loud. When Derek accidentally knocked over a packet of sugar, she chuckled lightly, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a pull. Not lust, not infatuation, something warmer, something like recognition. Their first conversation started because of storm. Rain hammered against the windows, trapping everyone inside. Eliza looked up and said, "Seems like the universe wants us all to stay a little longer today." Derek smiled, almost embarrassed by how long it had been since he'd smiled at a stranger. They talked, first about the weather, then about music, then about why chamomile was good for the soul. She listened with her whole face, her whole presence. And for a man who'd spent years feeling like a background character in his own life, that alone was disarming. Over the next few weeks, their paths kept crossing, sometimes by chance, sometimes because Derek drove the long way home, hoping to accidentally run into her. They'd share coffee, stories about childhood, dreams they never chased, and quiet confessions about loneliness. Eliza never talked much about her family. She kept her past locked behind gentle smiles and vague answers. But when she talked about healing, emotional healing, her voice carried an ache that hinted at battles she'd survived alone. Slowly, Derek found himself opening up too. About his father's temper. About the nights he slept in his truck to avoid arguments. About feeling like life had passed him by. Eliza never judged him. She never interrupted. She simply placed her hand over his and said, "You're still here. That means something." It was the first time in years someone made him feel seen. Their relationship grew quietly, almost cautiously. No whirlwind romance. No fireworks. Just two wounded people finding comfort in each other's presence. Derek loved the way she understood his moods without asking questions. The way she breathed when she was nervous. The way her voice softened when she said his name. And the way her laughter, rare but genuine, felt like sunlight breaking through cloudy windows. By the time they shared their first kiss outside her apartment, lights dim, the night warm enough to feel like spring, Derek knew he wasn't just falling for her. He was falling into something he thought he'd lost forever. A second chance at love, shaped by a woman who felt both new and strangely familiar. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful in the way quiet moments often are. A small chapel in southeast Atlanta, warm light filtering through stained glass windows, and about 30 people. Mostly Derek's friends, a few coworkers, and a handful of Eliza's colleagues from the skincare clinic. No bridesmaids, no groomsmen, no big family rows. Eliza had told him early on that her family was complicated, scattered across states, and that she hadn't been close to them in years. Derek, who carried his own scars when it came to family, didn't push. Eliza looked breathtaking that day. An ivory dress that hugged her shoulders, curls pinned back with small pearl clips, and eyes that held a softness Derek had come to rely on. But when she walked down the aisle, something flickered across her expression. Not fear exactly, more like someone bracing for a wave they knew was coming. It lasted only a second. Then she smiled at Derek, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. The vows were intimate. Derek spoke first, his voice cracking as he promised loyalty, patience, and a kind of love he thought he'd lost after his divorce. When it was Eliza's turn, she took a shaky breath and whispered, "I promise to love you without masks, without fear, with all that I am." The words landed heavier than he expected. Not poetic, almost literal, like a confession wrapped inside a vow. Her voice trembled on the last phrase, and she looked away for a heartbeat as if steadying herself. Most guests didn't notice, but Derek did. After the ceremony, the small reception played out in the church hall. Tables covered in white linens, a playlist of Luther Vandross and Anita Baker humming in the background, and plates of fried catfish and mac and cheese served buffet style. Marcus Powell toasted them, joking that Eliza must have the patience of a saint to marry a man who always lost his car keys and burned toast daily. Everyone laughed. Eliza smiled too, but there was that look again. A flicker of tension beneath her calm exterior whenever someone casually asked about her childhood or where she grew up. When Pastor Whitmore prayed for new beginnings and truth to guide this union, Eliza's hands tightened around her glass. Derek placed a reassuring hand on her back, assuming she was just overwhelmed. He didn't want to be suspicious. He'd promised himself he would not let old wounds turn him into the paranoid man he used to be. Later that night, in their hotel suite overlooking Peachtree Street, Eliza kept the lights low as she slipped into a silk robe. She said she was shy, that she preferred the room dim. Derek found it endearing. Modesty felt rare these days. But as he held her, as she leaned into him with that same mixture of affection and hesitation, a tiny seed of curiosity planted itself somewhere deep. It wasn't doubt. Not yet. Just something unspoken. Something gently knocking at the back of his mind. Something telling him that the woman he married, the woman he adored, carried a truth she wasn't ready to share. The drive into the Blue Ridge Mountains felt like stepping into another world. Endless pines, winding roads, and a quiet so complete it almost felt sacred. Their honeymoon cabin sat on a small ridge overlooking a valley, the the kind of rental couples choose when they want to disappear from the world for a few days. When Derek carried their bags inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. A second chance. A life he thought he'd never get back. Eliza seemed lighter, too. She opened the windows to let the cold mountain air in, humming softly as she unpacked groceries. Everything about her felt intentional. Her way of straightening towels, the soft lavender spray she spritzed on the pillows, the way she folded Derek's sweater like she'd been doing it for years. She was attentive, almost overly so, but Derek chalked it up to newlywed excitement. It wasn't until afternoon that the first crack appeared. Derek was unpacking when something slipped from Eliza's overnight bag and hit the hardwood with a soft thud. A small black notebook, leather-bound, edges worn. He bent down instinctively to pick it up. He meant to hand it right back. He really did. But the book had fallen open, just enough for one line to show. Jonah Isaiah Hart. His heart stopped. For a second, he didn't breathe. Couldn't. Because that name wasn't random. Wasn't a coincidence. Jonah Hart was his best friend in high school. The quiet boy with the sketchbook. The one who understood Derek better than anyone else. Who knew what Derek endured at home. Who never mocked him for sleeping through class because he couldn't sleep at night. Jonah was the only person Derek ever let see the vulnerable parts of him. They were inseparable until the summer before senior year, when Jonah vanished without warning. One rumor said he moved to California. Another said he ran away. None of them made sense. The notebook trembled in Derek's hands. He suddenly remembered the handwriting, clean, slanted, almost artistic. The same handwriting that now stared back at him on the page. He snapped the book shut just as Eliza reappeared in the doorway. "What's that?" she asked, her tone light, too light. "It fell from your bag," he said, offering it. Her eyes hesitated for a fraction of a second before she smiled and took it. "Thanks. It's just old notes. Just old notes." The lie was soft, but unmistakable. She tucked the notebook into the drawer of the bedside table, quickly, almost protectively. The moment she turned away, Derek noticed something else he hadn't really paid attention to before. The faint scar running diagonally along her upper thigh. A long, narrow scar. The same type Jonah received after falling onto a rusted pipe behind the school gym sophomore year. Derek had carried Jonah on his back to the nurse's office that day. His stomach tightened. That night, Derek lay awake listening to the slow spin of the ceiling fan. Eliza slept beside him on her side, her back to him, her breathing steady. But the longer he stared, the more pieces of the past rearranged themselves. Her laugh, her eye contact, the way she listened like she'd known him forever, the way she always seemed one step ahead of what he needed. And the scar? He closed his eyes, willing the thoughts away, but they kept clawing back. What if the familiarity he felt with Eliza wasn't fate or comfort or shared souls? What if it was memory? What if Eliza wasn't just the woman he fell in love with? What if she was Jonah, the boy he once trusted with his entire heart? He didn't dare say the words out loud. Not yet. But as the first light of morning filtered through the curtains, one truth rose like a chill in his bones. Something about his wife didn't make sense. And the notebook, that name, had opened a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. Derek spent the entire next morning pretending everything was normal. He chopped vegetables for breakfast. He stepped out onto the porch to breathe the cold mountain air. He kissed Eliza on the forehead when she handed him a mug of coffee. But beneath every movement, beneath every breath, something inside him was unraveling, thread by thread. The notebook, the scar, the familiarity, the way she seemed to know the parts of him he'd never spoken aloud. By noon, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Eliza was sitting on the couch wrapped in a knit blanket, scrolling through photos on her phone. When Derek stepped into the living room, she looked up and gave him the kind of gentle smile that used to calm him. Today, it only made his pulse spike. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay? You've been quiet all morning." He nodded once, but it was the kind of nod that meant nothing. "I need to ask you something," he said. Her smile slowly faded. "Okay, what is it?" Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out the black notebook, the one she thought she had hidden last night. He held it up, not accusingly, but like a man clutching a piece of evidence he wasn't sure he wanted to believe. Who is Jonah Isaiah Hart? The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was suffocating. Eliza's breath caught like she'd been struck. Her hands tightened around the blanket. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She looked at the notebook, then at him, and it was as if the entire world narrowed to the space between them. Finally, she whispered, "I was going to tell you." Derek swallowed hard. "Tell me what?" She looked down at her lap, her fingers trembling. "That I used to be him." It hit him like a physical blow, sharp, disorienting, impossible to process in one breath. "I used to be Jonah," she said, voice shaking but clear, "before I became Eliza." Derek felt the room tilt. He took 2 steps back without meaning to. His chest tightened like someone had wrapped wire around his ribs. "No," he muttered. "No, that doesn't, Eliza, that doesn't make sense." "It does," she whispered. "You just don't want it to." She stood slowly, as if her body weighed twice as much as usual. Her eyes were already glassy with tears. "Derek, I didn't transition to hurt you. I didn't run away to betray you. I ran because I couldn't survive as the person I was." Her voice cracked. "Back then, I didn't have the words. I didn't even know what I was. I just knew I wasn't the boy everyone said I had to be." She took a breath, deep, unsteady. "The day I left, I didn't say goodbye because I didn't think I'd make it. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I went to California to live with my aunt." She didn't understand, but she let me stay in her spare room. I worked at a diner, saved every dollar, took a bus 2 hours each way for hormone treatments because the clinics near us wouldn't touch someone like me. Her voice grew softer. "I spent years rebuilding myself. Therapy, surgeries, loneliness. I lost friends. My mother stopped speaking to me. Every step forward felt like learning to breathe all over again. But I kept going because I wanted to live as myself." Derek's eyes burned. "And you didn't think I deserved the truth?" "Not once." She shook her head, tears finally spilling. "I was going to tell you before things got serious, I swear. But you looked at me like I was your piece. Like I was everything you prayed for. I was terrified that if I told you the truth, you'd see me as something broken, something wrong. You let me marry you," Derek snapped, stepping forward. "You stood in front of God, knowing. "I know," she cried. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I wasn't lying about how I feel. I love you, Derek. I have loved you since before I even understood myself." The confession sliced through the room. Derek's hands shook. He turned away, covering his face. "This is sick," he muttered. "This is twisted. You used to be my best friend." "And I still am," she whispered. Her voice broke. "Just not in the way you remember." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see the woman he married. He saw the boy who once watched his back, who sketched him in secret, who disappeared and left him wondering why. And now that boy was standing in front of him as the woman he thought he loved. Eliza wiped her eyes. "I didn't hide the truth to trick you. I hid it because I wanted, just once, to be loved as myself. Fully, completely." Derek felt something inside him collapse, something old, fragile, and furious. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside into the cold mountain air without a word. Behind him, Eliza whispered into the silence, "I'm still me, Derek. I just wish you could see me." Derek didn't remember walking away from the cabin. One moment he was inside, drowning beneath the weight of Eliza's confession. The next he was stumbling through the trees, boots sinking into soft pine needles as if the forest were trying to swallow him whole. Cold air bit at his face, but he barely felt it. All he could hear was her voice. "I used to be Jonah. I was Jonah before I became Eliza." The words repeated like gunshots. He pressed both hands to his skull as if he could squeeze the truth out through his temples. A sick, twisting sensation churned in his stomach. The boy he once shared secrets with. The boy who knew his father hid him. The boy who disappeared without goodbye. That boy was now his wife. His wife. He stumbled to a fallen log and collapsed, elbows on his knees, breathing hard. A wave of nausea hit him. Then another. The forest blurred. His mind raced. Snapshots of Jonah, skinny wrists, quiet eyes, the way he used to sketch Derek during lunch like he was trying to memorize him. Derek had always felt strangely seen by Jonah, in a way that made other boys uncomfortable. His father used to sneer. Boys like that are weak. You stay away from them. A man knows exactly what a woman is. A man doesn't get confused. The memory slammed into him like a fist. His father's voice. That damn voice. The same one that shaped him, warned him, scared him into hiding the soft parts of himself. The same one he'd spent his whole adult life trying to escape. Now was back. Louder. You married someone who used to be a boy? You didn't even know? What kind of man does that make you? Derek let out a guttural sound, half growl, half sob. He punched the ground so hard his knuckles split. Blood smeared across the pine needles. He stood and slammed his fist into a tree trunk, again and again until bark tore skin. Pain didn't register. Only the feeling that something inside him was cracking open like a rotten beam under too much weight. He felt stupid, violated, humiliated, like his entire identity had been ripped out from under him. He imagined the guys at the auto shop finding out. His ex-wife, his father, dead now, but somehow still haunting every corner of his mind. He staggered back toward the cabin hours later, shoulders stiff, hands trembling. The lights glowed warmly through the windows, but his chest tightened at the sight. It felt like a set piece now, fake, staged. A life he'd been living without knowing the script. Inside, Eliza was at the stove, stirring something in a small pot. When she heard the door open, she turned with red-rimmed eyes. "I made soup," she whispered. "I thought maybe we could talk." Derek shut the door harder than necessary. He didn't mean to, but the sound made her flinch. He walked past her without a word, heading to the bedroom. He grabbed his duffel bag, threw it on the bed, shoved clothes into it blindly. The zipper snagged. That tiny inconvenience, so small, so meaningless, made something inside him snap again. The bag flew across the room. Clothes scattered like debris. Eliza froze in the doorway. "Derek, please. I know this is a lot. I know you're hurting." "Hurting?" He whirled around. His voice echoed off the walls. "You lied to me about everything." "I didn't lie about loving you." He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You think that makes this better? You think love fixes the fact that you hid who you were? That you let me fall for someone who didn't even exist?" Eliza shook her head, stepping closer. "I existed. Jonah existed. I'm still that person, just whole now. I didn't transition to deceive you. I transitioned to survive." "Survive," he spat. "And what about me? You stole my choice. You stole my right to know who I was marrying." Her voice faltered. "I was terrified you'd hate me." "Well, congratulations," he snapped. "You were right." The silence that followed was heavier than before, dense, suffocating, thick with everything broken between them. Eliza backed away slowly, her breath shaking. "I didn't want this. Derek, I never wanted this to hurt you. I just wanted a life. A real one. With you." He couldn't listen. Not now. Not with his mind spinning, his chest burning, his sense of self splintering. Derek stormed into the living room. The air felt colder. His heart hammered. His thoughts spiraled, messy, violent, frantic. He poured bourbon into a glass with shaking hands, but didn't drink it. He just stared at the amber liquid, like it held answers he didn't want to face. Behind him, Eliza cried softly, the kind of crying someone does when they've run out of ways to fix anything. He didn't comfort her. He couldn't. The night stretched long and merciless, the cabin walls shrinking around them, as if the truth itself had filled the room, pushing them into opposite corners. Derek sat alone, fists bruised, identity crumbling, the man he believed himself to be slipping through his fingers. And somewhere deep inside him, buried beneath years of fear, pride, and inherited shame, something dangerous began to take shape. Dawn crept in quietly, sliding across the cabin floor like a thin sheet of cold light. Derek hadn't slept. Not really. He drifted in and out between bursts of anger, waves of disbelief, and a hollow exhaustion that felt like drowning with his eyes open. When he finally stood, his body felt heavy, like he was moving through water. His mind, however, was sharp in the worst possible way. In the kitchen, Eliza was already awake. Her hair was tied back loosely, her face pale from a night spent crying. She had set out 2 mugs, brewed coffee the way he liked it, hazelnut creamer, 2 sugars, and was stirring oatmeal in a pot, as if a warm breakfast could stitch the pieces of their marriage back together. She turned when she heard him. "Morning," she whispered, voice tentative. "I thought, maybe we could try talking again." Derek didn't respond. His eyes drifted to the counter, to the drawer where he'd placed his Glock the night before. He wasn't thinking about violence. Not yet, not consciously. But something dark sat in his chest, heavy and simmering, pushing everything else out. Eliza, desperate for something normal, slid his mug toward him. "I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking, maybe I didn't give you enough space. Maybe I should have let you yell. I know you're hurting." Her voice was small, raw. Derek took the mug, but didn't drink. He watched her carefully, almost as if he were studying a stranger. The woman he married. The friend he lost. The truth that shattered him. She took a breath. "I didn't tell you the truth because I wanted to live. I wanted to be with you without the fear of being rejected again. But I never meant to trick you. I swear to you. Derek, nothing about my love for you is false." He clenched his jaw. "Did you plan this?" The question shot out like a blade. She shook her head quickly. "No, never. I didn't plan to fall in love with you again. I didn't plan for us to get married. I just hoped that if you knew me as Eliza, you might see the real me, not the lost kid I used to be." Her words only tightened the knot in his chest. "And if I hadn't found that notebook," he said slowly, "would you have ever told me?" Eliza hesitated. A half second, but it was enough. Her silence became the answer. Something inside Derek snapped, not loudly but quietly, like the soft crack of a neck when turning too far. He set the mug down. His hand drifted back toward the drawer almost on instinct. Eliza saw the motion and froze. "Derek," her voice trembled. "Please don't do this." He opened the drawer. The metallic clink of the Glock sliding against utensils filled the kitchen. "Derek, wait, just listen to me. We can work through this. I'm still me. I'm still." The first shot hit her shoulder. She screamed, falling back against the counter. The mug beside her shattered, coffee spilling in a dark pool. The second shot tore through her arm as she tried to crawl. The third hit her ribs. The fourth, her hip. The fifth, her back when she collapsed onto the floor. Each shot echoed through the cabin, ricocheting off wood, slicing through the quiet morning like a storm. Still, she tried to reach him, her hands stretching toward him, fingers trembling, eyes full of pain and something heartbreakingly gentle. She whispered, barely audible, "I love you even now." The sixth shot ended it. Eliza's body stilled. Blood spread across the hardwood like ink from a spilled pen. Derek stood there breathing hard, face blank, the gun lowering by inches as if gravity itself forced it down. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, as if waking from a trance, he knelt beside her. He touched her cheek, streaking more blood across her skin. And in a strange, almost ritualistic calm, he dipped his fingers into the red pooling beneath her and traced one word on the floor. Eliza. Not Jonah. Not the past. Just the name he married. The only name she ever wanted to live under. When police found him hours later, he was still sitting there, her body in his lap, the gun beside him, his voice trembling as he repeated the same words over and over. "She wasn't who I thought she was, but I loved her anyway." The investigation began before the blood on the cabin floor had even cooled. At 7:42 a.m., a neighbor walking her dog reported what sounded like 6 sharp, evenly spaced cracks, too precise for fireworks, too controlled for a hunter. When Officer Raymond Holt arrived at the Blue Ridge cabin, he found Derek sitting in the kitchen, legs crossed, back against the cabinet, Eliza's lifeless body draped in his lap like a child who had fallen asleep. Her blood had dried on his hands and shirt. The gun lay just inches away, still warm. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just whispered, she lied. I didn't know who she was. That single sentence would ignite a firestorm across the country. Back at the precinct, homicide detective Gabrielle Rios took over the case. A calm, methodical investigator with 20 years on the force, she didn't start with accusations. She started with silence, letting Derek talk when the weight of what he'd done finally cracked something inside him. She wasn't who she said she was, he muttered. Her name wasn't real. Her past wasn't real. My whole marriage wasn't real. Rios didn't react. Tell me about the moment you found out. He hesitated. Then the floodgates opened. The journal, the scar, the truth about Jonah, the confrontation, the panic, the rage. To her, it wasn't a confession of hate. It was a confession of collapse. But outside the interrogation room, the story was mutating faster than investigators could control it. Within hours, media outlets plastered the headlines. Honeymoon murder. Groom kills transgender bride after identity reveal. Deadly deception or hate crime. The Jonah secret. A marriage built on lies. Eliza, who had spent her whole adult life carefully building a new identity, was being dissected by strangers who didn't know her name until the day she died. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Morning talk shows debated whether Derek was a victim of betrayal or a monster hiding behind masculinity. Civil rights groups gathered outside the courthouse, holding candles and posters with Eliza's photographs, demanding justice for a woman whose truth had cost her everything. Across the street, counter-protesters shouted that Derek had been tricked, that deception had consequences. One sign read, "He married a lie." Another, "Truth matters more than identity." America was splitting down the middle. Gender identity, masculinity, betrayal, love, all wrapped into one impossible tragedy. Meanwhile, the forensic team was quietly building an airtight case. 6 shots, all fired from close range. No signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No break-in. No alcohol or drugs in Derek's system. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't an accident or a moment of flailing panic. It was controlled, deliberate. Then investigators made a discovery that complicated the narrative. On the kitchen floor, written faintly in blood, was a single name, Eliza. Not Jonah, not a dead boy from the past. The name she fought to claim. Detective Rios stared at it for a long moment. It didn't look like a triumph. It looked like a man kneeling in the ruins of his own identity, writing the only thing he still believed was true. When Rios confronted Derek with photos from the scene, his voice cracked. "I didn't kill her because she was trans. I killed her because I didn't know how to love what I didn't understand." It was a devastating admission, but also a dangerous one. Because in court, intent mattered more than remorse. In the court of public opinion, no one cared about nuance. America wasn't just watching a murder case. It was watching itself, its fears, its prejudices, its beliefs play out on the national stage. The courtroom was packed before the doors even opened. Not with friends or family. Eliza had no known relatives in Georgia, but with strangers, activists, reporters, students, church groups, and people who came simply because they wanted to stare into the eyes of a man whose story had split America in half. The air buzzed with tension, like everyone in the room already knew the trial was bigger than a single crime. It was a mirror held up to the country's face. State of Georgia versus Derek Coleman. The prosecution wasted no time painting him as a cold-blooded killer. 6 bullets, at close range, no defensive wounds, no struggle. A registered firearm he had to unlock intentionally. A honeymoon turned execution. "Ladies and gentlemen," the district attorney said, pacing slowly before the jury, this was not an outburst, not a momentary snap. This was punishment. This was control. This was a man who decided that his wife's truth made her disposable. She flashed the photos on a large screen. Eliza's body collapsed against the cabinets. Blood pooled around her. A shattered mug. Hazel coffee mixed with red. The note in her hand. The name written faintly in blood on the floor. A few jurors looked away. One covered her mouth. Then came the recording of the 911 call. A neighbor's voice trembling as she described hearing 6 sharp cracks. But faintly, barely audible, was Derek's voice captured before police arrived. "I didn't want this," she lied, "but God help me. I still loved her." It shook the room, but the DA didn't flinch. "Love," she said coolly, "does not justify a single bullet, and certainly not 6. When it was the defense's turn, the energy shifted. Derek's attorney, a composed, soft-spoken man named Ronald Braxton, didn't deny what happened. He didn't offer excuses or conspiracy theories. He didn't argue that Derek was innocent. He argued that Derek was broken. "This isn't just a case about a gun," he began. "It's about identity, hers, his, ours. It's about trauma so deep it fractures a man's sense of reality. Derek Coleman is not a monster. He is a man who never learned how to survive a truth that collided head-on with every belief he was raised on." He spoke about Derek's abusive childhood, the father who equated softness with failure, the culture that made vulnerability a weakness, the masculinity that was taught like scripture, unyielding, unquestioned, unbreakable. Then he brought psychologists to the stand, experts in trauma, gender identity, and identity collapse. One therapist explained, when Derek learned the truth about Eliza's past, it shattered his framework of who he believed he was. It wasn't the trans revelation alone. It was the collision of love, fear, masculinity, betrayal, and identity. His reality broke faster than he could process it. Some jurors leaned forward. Others stiffened, wary of excuses. Then Marcus Powell, Derek's best friend, took the stand. "Derek loved that woman," he said, voice shaking. "He lit up when he talked about her. He wanted kids. He wanted a future. And when he found out who she used to be, I think it broke him in a way he didn't know how to handle." The courtroom buzzed. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. And outside the courthouse, the shouting never stopped. "Justice for Eliza. Trans lives matter. He was deceived. Truth matters." Two Americas facing off on the same sidewalk. The DA delivered a devastating closing argument. "Eliza Marshall did not die because she lied," she said slowly. "She died because the man she trusted with her life believed her truth made him less of a man. That belief is not love. It is hate wearing the mask of heartbreak." Then the defense rose for the final time. "What Derek did is unforgivable," Braxton said. But it was not driven by hate. It was driven by a lifetime of fear. Fear of who he was allowed to love. Fear of who he was allowed to be. Fear of failing the rigid version of manhood he was taught. Fear can be as destructive as hate. He paused, looked at the jury, lowered his voice. "Punish him, but understand him." 9 hours later, the jury returned. Everyone rose. The forewoman unfolded the paper, her voice steady but strained. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree." A gasp rolled across the room. 35 years in a Georgia state prison. No parole for the first 25. Derek didn't cry, didn't collapse, didn't plead. He simply nodded, leaned toward the microphone, and whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Eliza." The trial was over, but the battle over what it all meant was just beginning. Derek entered Georgia State Penitentiary not as a headline, not as a symbol, but as a man hollowed out from the inside. The shouts from outside the courthouse faded. The protests, the debates, the think pieces, none of that followed him past the razor wire. What did follow him were the ghosts. One ghost in particular, a woman in an ivory wedding dress who appeared every time he closed his eyes. For months, Derek barely spoke. He refused interviews from every major network, turned down podcasts, documentaries, even a Netflix producer who offered a sensitive, humanizing portrayal. He didn't want to be humanized. He didn't want to be understood. He wanted to hurt, because in pain, he felt closer to her. He slept on the concrete floor instead of the bunk, ate only cold food, wrote nothing, read nothing. He existed in a quiet rhythm of isolation, yard, cell, silence. Then, one evening, he asked the prison chaplain for a favor. "Do you have a camera?" he asked. The chaplain, a gentle, gray-bearded man named Father Malone, paused. "For what purpose, son?" Derek's voice broke. "To tell the truth. For her, not for me." They set it up in the prison library. No lights, no crew, just a cheap camcorder on a metal tripod, a wooden chair, and Derek in an orange jumpsuit. He sat down, touched the back of the chair to steady himself, and stared at the lens as if it were a grave he'd been waiting to kneel beside. The red recording light flicked on. At first, nothing came out. Then, like a dam cracking. "I know most people think I'm a monster," he began softly. "And I guess I am. But I need to say something, not to clear my name, but because she deserved better." He talked about meeting Eliza, falling for her, how she made him feel like the world wasn't out to break him anymore. How her kindness brought out a version of himself he didn't know he was capable of being. Then he spoke her truth, gently, respectfully, painfully. When I found out she was Jonah, I didn't know how to hold both truths at once. That I loved her, and that she used to be someone I once called my brother. His voice shook. It wasn't the trans part that broke me. It was the fear. Fear that loving her meant I was something less. Fear that my father was right about what made a man a man. He looked into the camera for a long moment. I murdered the only person who ever loved me without conditions. And if someone out there hears this, please don't let shame turn you into me. Don't mistake fear for truth. Love, real love, is never a lie. At the end, he held up the slip of paper found in Eliza's hand the morning she died. I forgive you, even if you never forgive me. He pressed it to his forehead and closed his eyes. The video ended. Father Malone uploaded it to a private YouTube channel under Eliza's name. No title bait, no comments allowed. Just a photo of her smiling on their wedding day and a video called Final Confession. It didn't go viral, but it didn't need to. 2 weeks later, the chaplain handed Derek a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, slightly crumpled, written in shaky blue ink. Dear Mr. Coleman, I'm 19. I'm trans. My parents kicked me out last year. I haven't felt like myself in a long time. I watched your video. I saw your pain. I saw that you understood, finally, what your wife needed you to understand. Last month, I almost ended my life. Your words stopped me, not because you were right, but because you were honest. Because even broken people can tell the truth. You saved someone you'll never meet. And I'll never forget your name. Jay. Derek stared at the letter for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, his face softened into something that almost resembled a smile. Not joy, not forgiveness, just the faintest shape of redemption. A beginning, not an ending.